let's get back into this FBA history talk. But what I was thinking about today, right? Before the colonizers came, how they were living, how life was. Now, Hollywood, that got all misconstrued. You know what I'm saying? Giving people wrong ideas, but imaging is very powerful. Because when you look at the movies, right? And you look at the Western, and you see how the life was back in the day. They did have building and structures, right? But they try to say the natives were living in teepees and out in the open. Yes, there were tribes. You know what I'm saying? But they didn't really give you an image of how they were really living. Now, I think what up, everybody? How's all doing? Hope all is well. And if not, hope to get back on track sooner than later. So you can act to your thing. Now, man, General style. What I've heard, right? The teepee and the imagery is when those Mongolian Asians came across the Bering Strait and up into North America, and they were trying to travel around and doing their thing. Maybe they were hunter-gathering, whatever the case is. So Hollywood twists and turn imagery and throw you off and not telling you the story. But vibration is a vibration in this information age. You know what I'm saying? And the vibration I'm feeling is that, they have their cities set up. They have their homes. And yes, there were tribes because that's how culturally they were. Tribes, family, groupings, cousins, you know what I'm saying? Big family over here. Over there, spread it out throughout the land because that's how it were. There were rules, there were laws nationwide. They had homes set up, they had cities set up, you know what I'm saying? Now they had towns set up, I'm not sure how they call it towns or not, in the language, whatever the case is. But they had the settlements where they lived. And they had buildings built up. Now, if you notice, in the Americas, mainly in the South Americas, there are a lot of pyramids around. Now in the South, it's mostly warm. If you notice, that's below the equator. And if you know that the weather is mostly warm. It's never snow or cold like up north. You know what I'm saying? But now with the pyramid, they build a pyramid for their reasons, and then they build the cities around the pyramids in the different towns and streets and structures. Remember, they have farmers. You know what I'm saying? The FBA had their thing set up. The towns were set up. When the colonizers came, they set up their shop on the already set up towns with homes and buildings where people lived. Towns were raided. Remember, they took their land and they ran them out of town because they needed somewhere to stay, right? The colonizers with their guns and their war ready, right? Now the natives, the FBAs, the people that live on the land, they were loving, peaceful people. They weren't war ready. They weren't ready. But as the invasion and the takeover came along, obviously they had to get war ready and they had to fight, and there were battles. And there were battles, continuous battles throughout the years, throughout the decades, the centuries, the non-stop battle. But eventually, the world was too much for the FBA when everybody was coming. Remember, you had the Europeans. Those are all those different countries coming together. You had the English, you had the French, you had the Spanish. Everybody was coming down. And they all took over the land and they divvied up between themselves, disregarding the people of the land, disregarding their rules, disregarding their laws, because they ran up on them and took it over. Basically, prisoners of war. and took over everything and built on it. Now, if there were teepees and all of that, you telling me they would have been living in teepees? Obviously, no, they were living in cities and homes. Now, the architecture, think about this, right? Throughout the centuries and hundreds of years, how many inventors were there? Think about all the stuff that were invented by the FBAs. Think about it. Stuff that's throughout the world now, but think about all the things that were invented by the FBAs. That's what I'm saying. So you telling me they were living in teepee doing things? Oh no, the colonizers came and took over the land and, built everything up. And obviously the story with go to Africa and do their thing and come back, right? I'm just saying that you gotta look at history for what it is. What they're not telling you. They're telling you certain things, but they're not telling you the whole story. Cities and towns were overran. You know what I'm saying? People were massacred for what they had, for their homes. People were massacred. And that's the history. Now, they're not going to talk about it because it's really horrible crimes against humanity, but that's the reality of what happened. That's the reality of what really happened. Colonizers came and really took over. And now, here we are. You know what I'm saying? The history is written, right? The history is told by the victors. But the losers got their history too. Because the losers were a part of the situation. So you can't disregard the losers. They got their story as well. But because they lost the battle, you don't lose their history. You don't lose what they stand for. And that's what not be speaking about when you look at things. Just because the people that won the war get to speak and tell their side of the story, but there's a whole story when the other participation as well, But things takes time, and time is longer than a rule. He's a Yachty saying it, I mean. But we gotta understand, history of the FBA, history of the land of the Americas, Turtle Island, in other words. Let's think about that for a second. You know what I mean? They refer to the pyramids as mound, or the mound people and all of that, because they didn't understand who was living there and how they were living. They didn't understand the situation about the mounds. Because remember, the pyramid got covered up through time. Through time, if you look at the landscape now, over time it was all dust, trees grown, everything's covered up. It doesn't give the accurate story of a time that's one was. This is the reality, y'all. That's just a quick history talk. Part 3 on the subject. What y'all think? Even refer to the cowboys in Indian movies? That's when they were actively taking over. But Hollywood switches up and subliminally show you a different image of what went on. You know what I'm saying? Dino Star. I'm CLP, holding the vibe. And we'll catch y'all on the next vibration. Scene. It's all love. Dino.